Welcome to episode 44 of Published. This is the second part of a two-part series in which I'm speaking with John Willig, a literary agent and publishing consultant at Literary Services, Inc. If you haven't listened to part one yet, go back and check that out. That would be episode 43. Today we'll be asking John about the querying process and what that looks like for authors today.
Welcome to Published, a podcast by Greenleaf Book Group, where we'll discuss the ins and outs of the publishing industry, from writing a book and finding the right publisher to gearing up for a book launch. And now, here's your host, Greenleaf Book Group CEO, Tanya Hall.
Welcome back to Published. In this episode, longtime literary agent John Willig tells us all about what you should expect from the manuscript querying process. John also offers insight on how he finds the best publisher fit for his clients and how he's seen the agenting landscape change over his years in the industry. Let's dive into part two. Now let's fast forward to the process. Let's say we've decided we're going to move forward. John Willig is our agent, and you are now pitching to the publishers. So what happens? Well, can you describe that process for us, and how does that play out?
Well, it's it's kind of like a process, and we've all been through that process, of selling a home. The home being obviously, physical property. In a sense, we're selling intellectual property, in terms of all of that. So you're putting that for sale sign, out, and instead of sending it to a whole universe, of potential buyers, typically, agents, they'll have a good idea, of what company, which editors they want to be pitching certain projects to. So, once we have the package, all together, then it's a matter of submitting to those editors. The hope being, like as with, selling a home, is that you are going to have multiple levels, of interest, in that home and in this, new proposal, and book. That may lead to a potential auction on the work. It may not. You may have one or two publishers or editors say, hey, I love this work. I'd like to take it to, my board or my committee and see if we can come up with an offer for you. In all candor, you're never quite sure, what's going to happen. And you could have somebody, right away say, hey, I absolutely love this work, which is what you want to hear. I love what the author is doing here, their credentials, and I'd like to take it to, our board. You same proposal, same sample chapters. You could have, 5 or more other editors for whatever reasons, say to you, it's not quite for them. Maybe they've had, a similar book that hasn't done, so well. Maybe they have a similar book they've already signed, in the pipeline. There's a myriad of reasons why a publisher or an editor will decline, on a project and pass, on a project. So it's important, at some point I try to tell all of my clients and authors to keep in mind a great old saying that someone once said to me, that all rejection is God's protection. and once you're rejected, you become a real writer. Once you've the rejections come in, and you are going to receive those. But that's part of the process. And you just keep working it.
And just like selling a house, I'm sure it varies tremendously from project to project. But on average, what's a typical timeline for hopefully getting a yes?
Well, you should get a good sense within a month or two from editors. These days, it certainly can take a little bit longer, with, the whole process. I'm advocating a lot, to my clients to practice extreme patience today. let's just take a moment and think about the numbers in this industry. Any given year, there's approximately 150,000 books published by the quote unquote traditional publishers in all categories. So for every book that's published, I would venture to say that that editor, is receiving 25, proposals, 30 proposals for every book that's published. That gets us, into the millions of proposals, a year that are being submitted. Now, based on, how specialized a publisher is, let's just say like in the business category, a business publisher could receive conceivably up to 3,000 to 4,000 proposals a year. Obviously, that's a hell of a lot of proposals, and that's not even then saying all that they receive in addition to that in terms of the self-published works that don't necessarily sell too well that then are submitted and sent to these editors too. So they receive a whole lot. So there's a lot coming into their world with proposals. Given the current situation with COVID, imagine now tens of thousands of writers, home, penning, their next proposal and outline, and submitting to their editors and and to their agents. So there's just a tremendous amount of volume, in this whole world. So part of again, what is needed is that sort of patience. I also kind of remind my clients, and I think this is true regardless of who you're working with, or just today. I had mentioned to you earlier one of my favorite movies, Forrest Gump, and in Forrest Gump we have the great scene with Gary Sinise and Lieutenant Dan on the top of the shrimp boat, and you have to have a little bit of fire in the belly. You have to have that fire to you, and your agent should have that about your work. That hey, that agent is going to find that editor that feels the same way about your work. You're going to get that wow. And I've had that happen to me over the course of my career. And increasingly over the last, couple of years, where you're receiving 10, 12 rejections on a project, and then you'll have that editor who just totally embraces the work and wants to work with, you as the writer, and has none of the reservations that anyone else has expressed. Mm-hmm. But that you have to get to that point.
And in a best case scenario where we have a handful, well, maybe 2 or 3 editors who feel that way, how do you help the author choose the right publisher for them?
Well, there's a part of it, that's the information gathering for, that author, in terms of the company. So you're looking, that editor that is engaged, in the work and feels that it's a great fit for the company. So we typically, Tanya, will set up conference calls, or today, Zoom conferences, and you get a sense of the chemistry there. To our earlier point, I mean, this is a relationship that can last for years, and hopefully beyond the individual book right now, but hopefully future books too. So that's all, again, a part of all of that, and what that company is doing. All companies, just like all of us, I mean, have their strengths and weaknesses. But knowing what those are and having worked in the field, then you can bring that knowledge to the author, and given their capabilities and what they're doing, then you can conceivably you can work it out with a publisher.
Mm-hmm. And for those authors who may be looking at the financial picture here and saying, why should I give this agent 15% of everything? I'll do it myself. Why should that author consider using an agent versus tackling it themselves?
Well, it's a great country, and nobody is going to think they have to do that.
I'm trying to gently encourage them.
It's sort of like do-it-yourself painting, or do-it-yourself on your home, And if you've ever sold a home on your own, you could sell it, but then you get the buyer and you say, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Yes. With the contract. It's it's part of what we're doing, what we discussed before about the hats that we're wearing and the service that that we're bringing, and that goes beyond just the financials, and the deals and the legal aspects of a contract, and that's also part of why a publisher would want to work, with an agent, or an agency, is that they've worked with these folks. There's a level of trust, that's involved in that relationship. So the editors, will trust those agents and the agencies when it comes to the legal, contractual aspects of the work, and they're looking to increasingly, Tanya, to what the value that that agent can help in terms of the collaboration that's going to be taking place, whether it is about book covers or whether it is about scheduling. And my inbox is filled every day with all of these questions, and so we're guiding the author through this process, which on the surface can look to many folks as being how challenging can this be? It's just a book. And I ask anyone who is self-published and has gone through all of that, and then they're saying, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize there was so much involved in all of this." So there's a lot there. I like to think of us in many ways as kind of like Sherpas. We're guides. We're helping you get to that next level with your book and with your aspirations. So that's how we earn our 15%.
Well earned.
Thank you.
Of course. And of course, you mentioned COVID earlier. Obviously, COVID has changed things for many people and many industries, for better or for worse. How has it impacted the agenting landscape?
Well, to my point about, that we have so many writers, Tanya, that are now not necessarily out in let's say in the nonfiction world. They're not necessarily out doing as much speaking or conferences. They're not out doing as much consulting. So we have a lot of quote unquote house authors, current authors, who are proposing, their new books, and their works. So it's probably the most challenging time, I think, for new authors, to get published. That's not to say they can't, they will not, or they can't. It's just coming into it, knowing that, it is a very challenging time, because if I'm a publisher and I have hundreds and hundreds of current authors, many of them are proposing, new books right now. So that adds to the everyday traffic. We've had a lot of things with publishers as far as schedules. Books that were scheduled to be published this spring have been pushed to the fall and winter, and all of that, as you well know, impacts marketing schedules and publicity schedules and all of that. So to the point of how we're able to help authors, guide them through all of this, I think that's that's added to our sort of responsibilities and working with both parties to for better and positive outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And for those people who are listening and they've fallen in love with John Willig and they want to work with you, are you currently accepting submissions, and are you looking for anything in particular?
You're so kind. I have a quote on my my website. I have a number of quotes about from folks in the industry and business and the history of this wonderful business. One of my favorites, and it's in the new proposals section of my website, which is literaryservicesinc.com, is from the late Sonny Maida, who and Sonny was the editor-in-chief at Knopf and Random House. And Sonny was quoted as saying, on a good day, he felt he had the best job in the world because he could open up, his email or open up his mail, and someone will have sent him something where he just looks at it and he reads it and he says to himself, wow, this is great. What a great story. I can't believe this story hasn't been told yet. Or, wow, I never thought of it that way. What a great way to look at a certain problem, that's out there. Editors like what the pain points that you're experiencing. What kind of a way of thinking to address those pain points and be, in a way of service to people, to help them, get through whatever it is they're dealing with. That's the real kick in this business, regardless of how much that we have or we're working with. And that's what I think is the great part, of this business. So whether it's someone who I've worked with for 8 books, 9 books, and they send me that new one, or someone I don't know who has sent me a query, and I get that kind of response, I'll follow up. But I very much admire folks who, their work is kind of research based. They're weaving research in with their professional expertise and knowledge and stories, anecdotes. I think that those are the great books, today. And certainly in nonfiction, where the writers are in many ways like weavers. They're weaving this research with advice and kind of conversational and personal anecdotal stories, that add to the book. So that's sort of what I'm looking for, and it can be in any sort of category.
Mm-hmm. Great. It is an art and a science, isn't it?
It certainly is. It certainly is.
So what other parting advice would you like to offer the prospective authors listening to us today?
Besides reading your book, Tanya?
That plug comes at the end, John. But thank you.
And God bless her, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I was reading more about her, her life story recently. And I was really struck by how one writer was saying her approach was to accept, the small victories. Very much, an incremental, approach to the law, and her career and building on those, small victories. And I think that, there's a lot of wisdom in that, because our culture is so much instant gratification, and we want to be Instagram, stars, next week, and, all of this stuff, right? But here's someone who, in terms of her life story and her career, realized that, you keep moving the ball down the field. You accept, the small victories and the incremental gains. So when it comes to the world of writing, many times I will say, to folks who are aspiring, to write books, have you written articles? Have you written articles in magazines, in journals? Think strategically. We mentioned earlier about, Lieutenant Dan, and that's the fire in the belly, that gets you going. At the same time, you have to be a little bit, of someone else I admire is Bill Gates, who's very analytical. There's the cool, there's the analytical, there's thinking strategically about the world that you're, going into, and doing your homework and doing your research and building on those small victories.
Excellent advice. And what did you call it earlier? Excessive patience?
Extreme.
Close enough.
And excessive.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. You really shared a lot about the agenting side of the business and good advice, good sage advice overall. Thank you again.
It's been a genuine pleasure to visit with you, Tanya, and you take good care and stay in great health.
I will. Thank you so much. That's it for our interview with John Willig today. Hope you enjoyed learning about what it's like to work with a literary agent. For notes and resources from today's show, go to greenleafbookgroup.com/episode 44. You can also find advice for writing, publishing, and promoting your work in my book, Ideas, Influence, and Income, which you can learn more about at ideasinfluenceandincome.com. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on iTunes. It means a lot to have your feedback and certainly helps us make sure we're answering your publishing questions. Big thank you to Eleanor Fishborn, who produces the published podcast, and we'll be back next month with another new episode.
Thanks for listening to Published. To learn more, please visit greenleafbookgroup.com. And remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.